So I'm Lee Hossain from UKTI Inward Investment Team. One of my biggest clients is Suez UK, of which Stuart is our Suez's director, technical director, and I work very closely with Stuart as a client to make sure that Suez is doing really well in UK, expanding, and getting the sort of treatment they expect from the UK government. So I'm the UK government helping a company to grow and to expand and to really do well in this country. So today Stuart's going to talk about that journey and the experience and all the sort of great and good stuff they're doing, and to demonstrate that the partnership we have is a really fantastic example of how a big company and us and the government can work together for mutual benefits. So I'm really pleased to introduce Stuart, and after this session there'll be a Q&A, so we can take it from there. Thank you very much.
So I was asked to just talk about how we work, and we chose a theme being food. Otherwise we could be here all day, and I like speaking, so we could be here all day. So we looked at food waste and said, well, what do we do in the business, and how do we work within that network, and how do we use the likes of UKTI to help us develop our business in the UK? I'll cover four main areas. Food is a work stream in the UK, so how do we look at it? How do we harvest materials? How do we get materials from customers? Understanding the assets, and it's important to understand this isn't just physical assets like trucks on the road or AD plants or in-vessel composting plants. This is about assets of network, assets of knowledge, universities and other people that we work with. And then I'll give you a little bit of an insight into where we might be going and where we might also need some help from UKTI. So just to give some context, clean organic materials as part of the residual stream, as different from the dry recyclate stream. Number of different options to treat it and get it out of the system. So we do all of these as a business, so organics is one part of that. If you understand the scale of food in the business, depending on how much is minimised, so if you take the waste hierarchy and say, well, we should be working with customers to prevent and minimise, then you can have different options to say, well, how successful will we be with those customers at minimising food waste, because the less food waste there is, the less plants, the less activity we have. So it's counterintuitive to the business a little bit, but obviously minimisation works for us and works for our customers. So quite a number, that's maybe 55 to 60 dedicated plant equivalents by 2030 on top of what we've already got. So potentially a good potential. Starvation at the moment a little bit because of a policy vacuum and some financial constraints in the system, and other parts of government not helping us with things like FITs and RHI reviews, which isn't helping business confidence. So if I want to harvest materials from customers, so I've already done the minimisation and the prevention stage, so I now want to pick up the rest of the material. It's quite a costly process because it's a small volume. It's what we would class niche waste. It's a small volume per customer. So we've worked with RAP and we've looked at innovating in multi-body trucks, so we can have food and glass or food and general waste together, which reduces the individual cost of collecting food waste, because it's one of the biggest burdens. We've weighed bins, and we do this very much in the commercial industrial sector, because unless you know what your customer produces in weight and composition, you don't know how much food they produce. You don't know whether they produce more at Christmas or in the summer. Or in Freshers Week at a university, do they throw more food away? That sort of process, and that's really important to knowing how many bins, how much food waste you can get, and balancing your materials flow. We have to have an attractive commercial offer, so we have to bundle all of these things together as something for the customer that's commercially attractive. And last, it has to be convenient. Because I'm lazy, and I probably guess most of you are, if it isn't convenient, I won't do it. And if you take that philosophy to customers, if it isn't convenient, they're not going to do it either. But to understand food in the wider system, you have to look and say, well, actually, we often talk just about waste in the bin, but there's value of the product in the bin, there's extraction of materials from the system, and there's culture. And if you just look at that, so volume and composition of the bin, that's what's in the bin, understanding why it's in the bin, why there's contamination in the bin, why do people think that contamination's right or don't think that contamination is an issue. Extraction, if we're not doing efficient harvesting of the materials, then it's not a cost-effective solution. The customers won't do it. It's got to be at least equal or better than their current solutions. Valuing the materials. We have a good value understanding of the energy potential. We're struggling as a sector in food to realise the true potential of the digestate in AD, or the true value of compost in terms of minerals and nutrients. So that's still work to do, and that's valuing it, understanding it, measuring crop yield, to understand its true value against a fossil equivalent. And then finally, why do businesses and public waste food in the first place? Because if we don't understand that, if they suddenly have an epiphany and stop producing food waste, then the whole of the system falls apart. So understanding what might move them and what doesn't move them is vitally important. So we're then investing in data and understanding that, understanding across sectors. If you understand any weigh bins and every bin, you start to understand which sectors have what sort of wastes relative to each other. So generating data and using that data to understand is vitally important. If you take that down, and I love this graph, so the purple columns are the average weight distribution for bins for all customers, commercial customers. And if I extract then the blue, which is the average bin weights we get for the food and beverage sector. Now, if I was to challenge the audience, say, well, what do you reckon that is? Why do you think their bins are heavier, their residual bins are heavier than all the other sectors if they're in food and beverage? It might be because they've got food. So I can then work out what the impact on their residual bin will be when I take food out of it. And one of the things to understand on a rounded service is if we take food out of one bin, that bin becomes lighter and less full. So we might be able to take away a certain number of bins. And we've done work with customers where actually we've taken a third of the bins away because we don't need them, because it's in other bins, or we've minimised. And that's a saving for them. So vitally important to understand that process. But unfortunately, customers don't give us the same volume of waste every day. And here's a good university sector profile. This is tonnes for a particular university. It's one bin, effectively, and it's the weight in that one bin over time. And you can see big fluxes. And you can see times when that bin, if we schedule it, might be half empty, and we have other times when that bin's going to be over full. So understanding that seasonality in those processes is really important to understanding how to deliver a customer profile. But then when you talk to customers and say, well, actually, in your maturity, where are you? So on the left, you've got, your left, there we go. A customer's doing okay. He's got the basics right, he's doing his normal service. When we talk to those customers, say, well, what's your main drivers, what's your constraints? 30% of them say, well, I haven't got a challenge, really. And then it's 17% cost, and 11% of disposing of specific materials. That's niche materials. If I move up and say, well, a company that's doing better, its performance is higher, the challenges change. They've still got no challenges, but rather than cost being their second driver, it becomes education. And if you then take a commentary from that, and this is a quote, we've been given multiples of these, they become really nervous because they don't trust their staff to make the culture change to give the quality. And we know food quality specifically suffers from contamination. So one of their biggest hurdles is how to communicate to their staff. It's not the number of bins, it's not anything else, it's literally that process. But then also each customer has a different driver. If you're in municipal and you have weight-based targets, you go on weight. And food's a great product to go for if you want a weight reduction. You are on a recycling weight metric. But on avoided energy basis, it's the worst. On a CO2, it's kind of down the bottom end. And on a monetary value, per unit picked up, it's also the bottom. It's the most costly with the least value. Part of that's because we can't value the digestate yet, so we can readdress that a little bit. So understanding what the company and the customer wants to do is also important in how we design those services. And then you look and say, okay, if you take education as one of the big hurdles of starting to recycle niche wastes, one of the other things you have to understand is how do they communicate to their customers? So again, a company working okay, not doing badly, not doing overly well, most of their communication at the moment is in talks or training and passive. If you then look at those that perform in the higher levels, they're leading with waste recycling champions. So to make those changes, they start to have waste recycling champions. If the company doesn't want that yet, it's going to inhibit what they can achieve. You also understand within the process who in your business, who in your culture and your employees sit between campaigners, housekeepers, pragmatists and libertarians to understand how you can engage with each of those people to deliver those processes. Housekeepers are great because they will be your floor champion. But there's a burden on them, so how do you reward them? How do you incentivize them? And you have to go down to that level to make an organizational change. But once we've done all of that, and we've done all the clever knowledge stuff and the other bits and bobs, we still need facilities. So we still need to invest in big plants, industrial composting where we put food and green together, or AD plants. This is Charlton Lane in Surrey, where it'll be next door to a gasifier and it'll be doing digestion. So we still have to invest in that. We have to have the right conditions to invest in that. We have to understand the incentives, the policy drivers, and the local markets. But we can't do everything. So one of the big things for us is investing in network. UKTI are part of our network. They give us some intelligence and we give them some intelligence, or what we think is intelligence. We have a network of third-party off-takers because our customers are everywhere, but we can't have a facility everywhere. So we need trusted off-takers to treat the material or even to collect the material. We work with the industry bodies. I'm a director of ADBA. I chair the ESA Bi-Treatment Group, and I'm a member of the REA Organics Group. Why? Because that network is really important to make representation to government, to give a forceful argument where things need to be changed. So the network's really important. We do a lot of work with universities. A lot of the research into customers and customer behaviours isn't a main skill base of a waste company. So we're having to learn that. So we have to go out and find people that know how to do that. And we have to foster those relationships where they help us understand, make those changes, because customers want us not only to collect the bin, but help change their systems and their cultures. And we have to invest in customers. We have to help them how to engage with their staff and incentivize them. But we are exploring new stuff. We've finished a 2-year project looking at how to make animal protein from food waste by harvesting maggots. It's not the most pleasant process in the world, but protein on a ton per ton basis is worth more than energy from food waste. So we literally put the food waste on the conveyor belt, populate it with maggots. 9 days later, we separate the maggots from what's remaining of the waste. We dry the maggots, we pasteurize them, we process them into animal feed, and they go back to an animal process. That is the potential. There are some challenges in that process, but we've successfully done it to a grade that's acceptable. Commercializing that is our next stage. And if you go beyond that, we've done some work looking at solvents, at fuels, at a whole pile of different products that you can make from the organic waste. So AD is really only the first step on the journey. There's a whole pile of other things that we can do, very high value chemicals that can be made, that can go back into our chemical industries, that can keep them profitable with homegrown resources from renewable sources. So a whole pile of different things that we can do, yielding bacteria and other things that are really, really positive contributions. So in conclusion, we're not just investing in facilities. That's quite easy to build a facility, but building the knowledge and the practice, understanding the network, the universities, the people who hold the knowledge, who can give you insight. We're not doing it for today, we're doing it for the future, so we want a 10 or 15-year visibility. And we always task Lee with saying, you need to tell government we need a 10 or 15-year facilities. These things cost many millions of pounds to build. We spent millions of pounds on the research. We don't want to invest in something where the market changes dramatically. We have to invest in the network. We have to have a network of people. This is a collaboration. One of the key points of the circular economy is collaboration. If you don't collaborate, you can't be circular. So we have to peer and cooperate. And finally, to invest in a whole range of different things on food waste. To give employment, to give money, and to give income to the UK, and to bring in our knowledge, and also now, increasingly, to export some of our knowledge back to our sister companies around the world, and to promote business elsewhere.